As we discussed last week on the show, President Donald Trump has signed a slew of executive orders aimed at immigration policy. Now, this week, there were several reports of ICE raids and arrests in major cities across the country, including New York City. To unpack the impact of the executive orders, the legal challenges ahead, and the state's role in protecting immigrants, we sat down with Murad Awawdeh, President and CEO of the New York Immigration Coalition. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Murad.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, under a recent executive order, President Donald Trump has moved to end birthright citizenship. Now, I wanted to get your reaction to this measure as someone who understands the struggles of immigrant communities in New York.
Well, as you know, President Trump was just elected recently, but inaugurated on Monday, and immediately passed a slew, signed a slew of executive orders and actions that were straight up anti-immigrant. None of them were to actually make America safer. And in this moment, what we're seeing is even with the birthright citizenship executive action, a judge just less than 24 hours ago put a nationwide injunction on it saying that it is unconstitutional. So a lot of these actions we believe are unconstitutional, and we're waiting to see how they come out of how the court system processes them in this moment.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the federal judge temporarily blocked that executive order. So are there any plans for the New York Immigration Coalition to be involved with or assist in any legal challenges to this measure?
Yeah, so we're assessing the executive orders currently, and we've already filed with our national partners, the National Immigration Law Center, Freedom of Information request on the rescission of the sensitive locations directive to understand what decision-making thoughts went into that, so that we have a better understanding of what's happening within the Department of Homeland Security in this moment. And we are assessing which other executive actions we are going to take action on. Additionally, we're working at the local level here across the state, as well at the state level, to actually protect and defend our communities, which is why we're fighting for the New York for All Act, which would say that the state of New York will not invest any resources to collude with immigration enforcement, and collude with family separation and harming our communities and our local economies, as well as fighting for additional immigration legal services funding of $165 million to make sure that people aren't going up against a government-trained prosecutor and judge whose sole job is to remove them from this country.
And in addition to that executive order, the president also signed an order stripping churches and schools of immigration enforcement protection. So can you help us put that into context? What do you think the implications of a measure like this will be? And we'll get into, of course, your state efforts after.
The rescission of the sensitive locations memo is just heartless. It is trying to inflict even more fear and chaos in communities across the state of New York and this country. I think whenever anyone thinks a safe haven or a place where you will be safe is a hospital or your school or your place of faith. And that memo pretty much said that ICE will not operate in those spaces. But this administration is, again, not leaning into the safety and security of our country. They're leaning into cruelty. And that's the point of this, is when they rescinded that, they're saying we're going after everyone everywhere, regardless of, your sensibilities or where you think you may be safe. We're coming for you everywhere. And that's just gutless and heartless in this moment.
And from your purview, what role should New York and the legislature play in sort of combating these efforts and protecting the rights and freedoms of immigrants while this is a federal, measure?
Well, as you know, New York has been known to lead in the nation, and we're looking to New York to lead again. We need the state legislator and the governor to lead in this moment in helping us pass the New York for All Act, which would stop the state from using any of its resources to collude with family separation, harming our communities, and gutting our local economies. New York for All Act will ensure that New Yorkers feel safe in the state of New York, that their state is not harming them. Additionally, we're fighting for increased resources for legal services of $165 million to ensure that people in deportation proceedings get the help that they need. They're going up against government-trained prosecutors and judges whose sole job is to remove them from this country. And what we do know is that our community's contributions are huge here in the state of New York, contributing over $68 billion in combined taxes to the state, having the spending power of $150 to $200 billion. Those are not little numbers. Those are not, minuscule impacts that we are going to not feel. Every aspect of life here in New York is touched by an immigrant one way or the other, from our food being, planted, picked, stocked in stores, and sold in immigrant small businesses. These are all things that continue to nourish not just us individually, but our state, to our healthcare workers who are a majority who are immigrants. These are attacks on every single aspect of life here in New York, and we need the state of New York to fight back against this mass deportation plan.
And from a legal perspective, if these measures go unchecked, what will be the long-term implications for immigrants around the country and here in New York?
Well, the president's executive actions are being checked, and they are being litigated in this moment. So we'll see how the court process proceeds. We're already seeing good indications that, as we thought, some of these actions are unconstitutional. But what we do need is leaders to stand up and to fight back. We need our political leaders to stand up and fight back. If not, we're going to have real serious problems on our hands, like in a state like New York, where 1/4 of our population is immigrant, where 5 million workers in the state are immigrants, and we can't live without immigrants. New York has been built by every wave of immigrants and will continue to. There is no New York without immigrant New York. So it's really important that our state leaders stand up and fight back in this moment, to fight for families, to fight for our communities, and to fight for everything that we love about our state.
And we did some reporting recently on some state policies to help immigrant communities, such as the New York for All Act, which you mentioned, the Dignity Not Detention Act, and the Legal Representation Act. Now, can you start by telling us how these policies could potentially help immigrant communities this year? And also, I wanted to get into some of the strategy that you'll be putting forth this session, as I know these aren't necessarily new policy issues that you're taking up.
Yeah, the New York for All Act is pretty simple. It says that the state of New York will not use any of its resources to collude with immigration enforcement, because that's a federal responsibility, not the state's. It also says that we are not going to collude with the separation of family and the harming of communities. And I think that is the floor. And that's why we are asking that our state legislative leaders, our assembly members, our senators, and our governors step up and support it so that it actually becomes the law of the land. What we're seeing already within the first week of this administration is massive fear happening. We've already seen raids happening across the state of New York, and that is going to only get worse. We need the state to step in and say, we are not going to participate in this, and we are going to protect our New Yorkers. The Dignity Not Detention Act would actually prohibit the use of jails for immigration detention. And what we're going to start seeing is that the Trump administration is going to start looking for ways to detain people and leave them in jail, regardless of whatever the issue may be that put them there to begin with. So we should not be using our state's infrastructure to support the mass deportation apparatus that's being built right now. And then the Access to Representation Act is just that. It's saying that in the criminal justice system, you have a right to an attorney, but in our immigration system, we do not. So we want to make sure that people who are going up against a government-trained prosecutor and a judge whose sole job is to remove you from this country, that you have the support of an attorney who's going to help you navigate your case. And what we've seen is that people with immigration lawyers actually have a 10 times more likelihood of winning their case and being able to stay with their families and in their communities in New York.
And from your purview, will these policies be enough to help address challenges on the federal level?
They will be enough to protect New Yorkers from the federal government that is only seeking to sow more chaos and cruelty across our country. So it is our responsibility as New Yorkers to stand up and fight for one another and to fight for the dignity and respect that we believe everyone deserves.
And what do you make of the argument from Republicans here in Albany that the focus for the legislature should be on New Yorkers and they shouldn't be allocating resources to immigrants?
Well, immigrants are New Yorkers, so we should be allocating resources to all New Yorkers. So I agree with them. We should be allocating resources to all New Yorkers and making sure that they are not just barely surviving, but that they are thriving, which is why we are supporting and leading the campaign for the Working Families Tax Credit, which would give families the credit that they deserve and also put more money in the pockets of parents. And we look forward to everyone, including the gentleman who made that comment, to support the Working Families Tax Credit, which would give families at least $1,600 per child in the state of New York, a tax credit, which will go a huge way to helping families really be able to make ends meet. Everyone is hurting right now, and people have been hurting for over 6 years at this point with the affordability crisis. And that's the irony of the moment we're living in, is that when you look at every single exit poll during the presidential election that just happened, the top issue in that exit poll is affordability and the economy. The top issue by far in every single exit poll. And instead of addressing that, what we see is the Trump administration coming in and trying to create a deeper affordability crisis by harming immigrants across this country. It does not make any sense. Instead of actually trying to relieve the pressure on the American people, what we're seeing is that the pressure is about to get turned up higher.
And lastly, what do you want New Yorkers to know or understand about what is going on at the federal level and how it might affect them?
I think all New Yorkers should know that this administration has already come in attacking people's constitutional rights. And there is a saying that if they're not coming for you right now, they will come for you next. And that's exactly what is going to continue to happen. So that's why it's important for everyone to stand up and voice their concern, reach out to their congressional members and lodge their concerns with them as well to make sure that they hear them, that they understand that they're against these attacks on New Yorkers and that we're going to fight for one another. Because if we don't fight for one another, no one's going to be fighting for us when it's our turn.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
And we were speaking with Murad Awawdeh, President and CEO of the New York Immigration Coalition. And for more on the details of federal immigration policy, you can visit our website. Again, that's at nynow.org.